Hi everyone, welcome back to Call to Mothering. Today I have Nicki Truesdell here on the podcast to talk about how we can be intentional as moms and also about the importance of those everyday, ordinary moments with our children. Nicki is a mom of 5, a blogger, a speaker, and a second generation homeschooler. I know that you're going to love this conversation. But before we get into that, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and also ring the notifications bell so that you know anytime I upload a new video. Welcome everyone back to Call to Mothering. I have a very special guest with us today, Nicki Truesdell. She is a mom of 5, the author of Anyone Can Homeschool. She is also a blogger and she is a second generation homeschooler as well. So welcome, Nicki. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me. It's good to catch up again.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. Well, like you said, I have 5 children and actually 3 of them are now adults. And so I
Mm-hmm.
have 2 kids still at home and homeschooling them. They're teenagers. And I have 2 grandchildren. And I am just keeping busy aside from homeschooling as a blogger and an author. And I speak at area conventions from time to time. And the main thing I talk about is home education and almost everything that has to do with that. And then any time that's left over, I spend printing old history books, bringing them back into print because I believe in preserving something besides Kindle and audiobooks for posterity so that our history is written down and preserved by families in their home. And as you said, also, I am a second generation homeschooler. My parents pulled me and my sister out of school in 1983. And so I've been in the homeschooling world for over 40 years now. It's kind of crazy when I look at it that way. And so, um, I learned a lot from my mom, and as I grew up, I learned a lot looking back at our homeschooling years. And then, of course, my own time as a homeschool mom has taught me a lot of things too.
Wow, that's really interesting. 40 years in the homeschool world.
I know it makes me feel kind of old when I say that.
Oh, yeah, we've only been doing this for the past 10 years.
Okay. Well, I have been homeschooling as a mom. This will be year 24. So
Wow,
a
that's
little,
awesome.
but my kids are also pretty far spread out in
Mm-hmm.
age. So that's why.
Yeah. You were a single mom at one time, and you also
Mhm.
homeschooled during that period. Can you tell us how you were able to do that? How you were able to continue staying at home with your kids while you were single?
Yes. The first thing I want to say is it was not simple. And I never tell single parents that it's easy, but I always say that it's worth it. And so for me, it happened because I chose to leave an abusive marriage. And the choice was very sudden, and I was not prepared to start over as a single mom. And so I had 2 little girls. We had already begun our homeschool journey, and I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. And so I had quite a lot to change very suddenly because we had to have money to survive. But because we had gone through already one traumatic experience, I didn't want my kids to be uprooted from home every day on top of that. I really wanted to be able to be there with them. I was 100% convicted that homeschooling was what we were going to do. And so instead of giving that up, I just had to figure out how. I had to figure out what are we going to do? How are we going to
Mhm.
survive and continue um, not having a public school education and not putting my toddler in daycare? And so what I found out was that there's not one right way to do it. There's not one single way to homeschool as a single parent. There are so many ways. And the thing you have to do is learn to think differently than the public school system and to not try to copy that at home.
Right.
What that means for a single parent is whatever your work schedule is, you work your homeschooling around that. Whatever your budget is, you work homeschooling into it instead of sacrificing, more hours to pay for a very expensive curriculum, or trying to manage homeschooling from 8 to 3 Monday through Friday.
Mm.
You don't have to school during the same time as the public school. You just need to find a way to accomplish an education at home. And for so many people, it looks different. It can be an online curriculum, or a hybrid school, or a grandmother who helps,
Mhm.
with lessons. I mean, the possibilities really are endless as long as you think differently than what school looks like in your mind. And what I always tell all parents is that we are not schools, we are families. And so be a family first, be a parent first, and just look at your schedule and your budget and figure out, how will I fit an education into all this, and be content with it being different.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you were able to kind of rethink what school and education look like?
Yeah, and it didn't come easy, and it doesn't come easy for everyone. In fact, I'd say most people, because, Americans are used to the American public school system. I mean, that's how most everyone has been raised, and so it is hard to think, "I'm gonna do it different,"
Yeah.
without thinking, "I'm also gonna mess my kids up terribly."
Mhm.
And so, I just wanna encourage parents that, first of all, ask yourself, "Why do I wanna homeschool?" And you probably have a good reason for it. And if you have a good reason to take your kids out of the public school, then why are you worried about copying what they do anyway? They're obviously failing you in some way, so don't copy their system. Just, flip the whole idea on its
Yeah.
head and just say, "How am I gonna educate my kids?" If pretend you never heard of the public school system, and go from there. That's hard to do, but
Yes.
it's so worth
Mhm.
it, and it just sets you free.
Yeah, that is hard because you have such an idea ingrained in your head.
Yeah.
You went to public school. I went to public school all 12 years from kindergarten through 12th grade, so 13 years. And so that's all that I knew when we started in 2014.
Yeah.
So I've tried not to do school at home, but I still slip into that once in a
It's hard.
while.
It's hard to
Yeah.
break out of that completely, and, I
Hmm.
mean, like you said, you've been homeschooling since 2014. You would think by now you would never think about that other system again, but it's the American way, so,
Yes, it is.
everyone thinks that way.
Yeah. How can we be intentional with our children while we're at home, either homeschooling or just being a stay-at-home mom with young kids?
Um, that's hard, especially with young kids, but I
Hmm.
think it can be a struggle because we tend to focus on small details every day, like, constant spills, or the baby won't stop crying, or I cannot seem to get dinner made, and so it's easy to focus on what's happening right now. But I think one of the most important things about being intentional is thinking about the big picture. And, it's a lofty goal, especially in the middle of raising very small children, lots of little children, or lots of children in general. But if we have a vision for eternity, it helps us to focus a little bit more on that big picture, and to think about discipleship, even if it's 10 minutes. If you had 10
Hmm.
minutes to sit and read the Bible with your children, or pray with them, that's being intentional. Saying what we believe out loud and modeling it. I think often you know, we have quiet time, we have our own Bible study or reading time or prayer time, but how often do our kids see us doing it? And so I realized that not that many years ago, that even if I am very devoted to my prayer and Bible time, if I'm in my bedroom with the closed doors, or the kids are still asleep, they're not seeing it. And of course, it's a huge distraction to try to do
Yeah.
that in the midst of children, but I think it's an important thing to show them. Somehow let them see it, because we can say it all day long, but they need to see that we live what we believe. And
Hmm.
that really applies to everything. Saying it and then letting them see us live it out. I also think, doing things that are hard, which is a lot of things when you're a mom. Um, you know, stopping when, and I struggle with this even to this very day, stopping when you feel frustrated with your kids or angry, and trying not to say all the negative words, but to bite your tongue and either hold it in
Mhm.
until you feel less angry or go ahead and say something positive anyway. And I'm not perfect at this, but I know how important it is to be intentional to say the words that those kids need to hear because we are building life into them. And biblical discipleship, how whatever form that takes in your stage of
Mhm.
motherhood, whether it's a 10-minute Bible story and praying or a lengthy Bible study each day and teaching your kids to walk through the scriptures. To me, those are some of the most important intentional things.
Yeah, that's good. It's hard to build intentional times into your day because you are thinking about, what is the most important thing that I have to get done. I have tasks right in front of me. I have dinner. I have cleaning. I have little people that need my attention right now. So it's
Yeah.
hard to think long term. I think that's where we get stuck as moms. We don't think long term. We think, there's so many things I have to do right now in
Right
this
now.
moment.
Well, my husband and I try to have our Bible study and praying with our kids at night. Right now, it's the time that works for us, and so we have all teenagers at this point. And sometimes at night, everyone's kind of settled into something that they're doing right before bed, whether it's watching a movie or in their rooms doing something, or I want to go to bed early.
Mhm.
And it's so easy to say, well, we'll do it tomorrow night. But what we continually remind ourselves, and this is about being intentional, our teenagers are not going to be with us much longer. And the time that we have to spend and to influence them is getting shorter and shorter and shorter,
Mhm.
and every single night counts. And so that's another example of being intentional, just thinking about eternity despite what's happening right this second, despite the, like you said, all those needs
Mhm.
and tasks on our list.
Yeah. Well, I have a teenager and a preteen, so I know that time is shortening. It seems to get shorter every year, I think.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I also learned this because I have two adult children who've moved out of the house. And so I don't regret any of the parenting that we did, but I can always look back and wish I had done more. And I'm not saying I did it perfect. When I say I don't regret it, I don't mean it was 100% awesome. I just they were home. They were homeschooled. They were discipled in our home. We were very intentional about Bible study all through those years, as much as possible, with some exceptions. But as far as what our goals were and how we tried to achieve them, I wouldn't change a thing. But I just wish I had done even more. And so, take it from someone who's looking back. Um, don't ever skip that opportunity to do a little bit more pouring into their eternity, their eternal life, their salvation.
That's good. That's really important. You share a lot about ordinary motherhood, and you recently posted something that I thought was so wonderful. It had to do with, or it was about near Christmas time, but I thought it applied so well to every season of the year. You said how ordinary motherhood is special. Can you talk about that a little bit? What is ordinary motherhood, and what does that look like?
If I remember the post, it was probably something about, it's the simple things you do every day, making
Yes.
breakfast every morning, cleaning up the same messes, answering the same questions over and over, even with teenagers, repeating instructions 1,000 times. It is very ordinary. It's not spectacular, like being having some awesome career or being famous. It's very ordinary. And at the same time, it is the most influential position there is on this earth. Um, and so sometimes it's exciting and sometimes it's very frustrating. The excitement comes when your kids learn something new or they finally get something you've been telling them for so long. And then there's the frustration of the opposite happening when you just think, how many times do I have to say this thing? Why don't they listen? But it's definitely about seeing the big picture again, just like being with intentional, um, understanding that this is it's a small snapshot in time. And for an adult, a human to live 80 to 100 years, that's a long life. mothers have about 20 of those years to influence the rest of those others.
Mhm.
We have about 20 years to influence up to 80 years. And so all those ordinary things we do shape who our kids are going to be. And whether it's just, waking the kids up a certain way every morning, or having a special game night, or the way you celebrate a holiday, or, all those little things that every family does differently, but that are special. That's ordinary motherhood. It's a lot of repetition, a lot of prayer, a lot of living in the moment, a lot of patience. But our kids remember things that um, we would have no clue that stuck out to them the most. I know I remember things from my childhood that are probably mostly insignificant, and my kids do too. And that just shows that even these little ordinary day-to-day things, they build memories, and they shape who our kids are going to be someday.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. We are shaping who they will be, basically, for the rest of their lives, even though we only
Mhm.
have those, 18 to 20 years with them. That does shape the rest of their lives, and so it's very important. Our role as moms is extremely important.
It is. And when we shape our children, we are shaping our grandchildren too, and our
Mm,
great grandchildren. And that can be a very exciting thought or a very overwhelming one. But I mean, just think of your own life, how your parents shaped you, and they were shaped by their parents. So
yes.
it's not just about right now when the kids are at home. It is definitely for generations. And so we can have an amazing impact on the generations.
Why do you say that mothers have the most influence in their kids' lives out of anybody? Maybe not besides their fathers, but
Right. Well, there is just it's a special relationship with mothers and children, and the fathers have a very special one too.
Mhm.
But I think in most situations, the mother is the most influential. We typically spend the most amount of time with them. We make those little decisions most all day, every day. Every decision, we have the most conversations with them. And I know there are exceptions to this, obviously, but our role, I mean, it was designed by God to be this way, and so it is very natural for us to just have their ear and to have their hearts,
Mhm.
and we want to have their hearts. It's so important. Our influence can be positive or negative, and that's something we have to remember. And I have to think about this a lot because I'm kind of a black and white person, and it's hard for me to always break out of that and see the in between, and to think about feelings and emotions when I think in terms of must do, must not do, things like that. And so even for me, I have to think, don't forget the positive stuff. Don't forget the all those things that are not about rules, but they're about relationship. Um, and there might be people that are opposite from me, and they're all about the relationship and the rules. I mean, and not the
Yes.
rules. And so we're all created different. God gave us these differences in personality. Um, but remembering the fruits of the spirit are so important for everyone, because no matter how we were created, those fruits of the spirit apply to all of us if we have the Holy Spirit in us. Um, we are so influential because they see us, and they hear us. And again, that can be positive or negative.
Yes.
So like I said earlier, it's very important to say what we believe and to live what we believe. And kids do watch that. And little kids notice it, but I don't know how many adults I've seen grow up and say, well, my parents said this, but I don't think they believed it, because their actions didn't show it. And so we are influential just by living in the same house together. Everything we say and do does make a statement. And so it's very important. Israel Wayne says, I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly, but basically, whoever spends the most time with your children has the most influence on them. And so, not only are we naturally the most influential, but we absolutely should be the most influential outside the father, especially in the society where we find ourselves. We are absolutely the best ones to be that primary influence on our children.
Yes.
So it does come naturally, but it should also be intentional. We should take that very seriously too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I think what Israel Wayne says is time plus affirmation equals influence.
There you go. He does, and that is the best way to sum it up.
Mm-hmm.
Time
Yeah.
and affirmation.
Yeah.
And I know that it's hard when, some kid in your house has argued with you 10 times today, or they're just not, they're not going to pick up the socks off the floor, or, even bigger things. There are much bigger things than that you have these arguments over. And so it is hard to affirm. And so we absolutely cannot do this without the grace of God. I can't do it without the grace of God. Um, having that affirmation part too. So time, absolutely,
Yes.
affirmation on top of it is so important.
Yeah, it can be hard to zero in on the positives, and be intentional about praising them for what they do well.
Yeah.
What they've done right, or what they're good at. What they have natural abilities for.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on the negatives, or how many times you had to tell them to pick their socks up off the floor,
Yes.
and do these other
And there
things.
are certain kids at different ages where that obviously is a big part of your child rearing, depending on their personality, and it is hard, but um, if we remember that we are shaping eternity, it's a little easier to take a deep breath and do say something positive and affirming, while also helping our kids to learn, right from wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I hope that you were encouraged by part 1 of my conversation with Nicki. Stay tuned for part 2, where she shares about how we can give our children a firm faith foundation, and also raise our children in what she calls a family culture. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, you are not just a mom.